What's good here is Wrestle Kingdom here. Now today I'm going to be discussing the recent episode of Monday Night Raw. I'm going to jump straight into it. Starts off with a Drew McIntyre promo. Of course, immediately when he gets in the ring, starts off with the crowd chanting CM Punk, of course. And then he starts talking about CM Punk. He starts talking about how CM Punk is not trustworthy, shouldn't believe anything he says. Then he starts mentioning what happened last week with CM Punk calling him a coward, arriving in the arena right after Drew McIntyre pulled off. Mentions how the week before he went to the Skybox chasing after CM Punk and how he wants to get his hands on CM Punk. Then he starts mentioning Jey Uso, mentioning how Jey Uso took his spot, how that's his spot. Jey Uso doesn't deserve to be in that position. Then he starts mentioning Damian Priest. Then Damian Priest comes out. Damian Priest comes out, calls Drew McIntyre delusional. It ends up saying that since you can't shut up, why don't you do something different? Tonight, why don't you say what you want to say, but say it to somebody's face? Drew responds, ends up saying that I would if CM Punk didn't keep running away from me. But then after that, Drew McIntyre starts congratulating Damian Priest, giving Damian Priest his respect, talking about he put in a lot of hard work, but you don't deserve to be a champion. It ends up saying that the situation right now is that the title is making Damian Priest. Damian Priest isn't making the title. And he ends up saying that the World Heavyweight Championship needs Drew McIntyre. And then he starts alluding to that Damian Priest basically isn't a real champion because he cashed in with the Money in Bank instead of beating him, saying that he starts alluding to that the reason he cashed in was because he knew he couldn't beat Drew McIntyre. Damian ends up interrupting him, calls him delusional, ends up saying that Drew McIntyre blames everyone for his own failures but himself. Then he ends up saying that you could call me a paper champion all you want, but at the end of the day, that was later. Before that, Drew McIntyre ends up interrupting him, he ends up telling the crowd to say what if you think he's a BS champion. The crowd ends up saying what? Drew McIntyre starts laughing. Damian Priest ends up responding, ends up saying that I'm still a champion. Then he ends up saying that you need to look in the mirror, look at the reflection of that mirror, and blame that asshole. Then he ends up saying that I wanted to cash in on Seth, and me and you could have been the ones fighting at WrestleMania. But you were the one that stopped me from cashing in multiple times, which is true. When Damian Priest was trying to cash in on Seth, Drew McIntyre was the one that stopped him. Like, I think he stopped him like twice, maybe even 3 times from cashing in. So that is true. And he ends up saying that's your fault. That's Drew McIntyre's fault. Then he ends up saying that you were the one that ended up telling the world that if I was smart, I would wait until you beat Seth Rollins and then cash in. And guess what happened? Which is also true because Drew McIntyre did say in a promo that if Damian was smart, he should have waited until after I beat Seth when I was tired, exhausted, and then cash in, which is true. You did say that. Then he ends up saying that at Mania, you finally got your moment. You finally did it. But then you saw CM Punk and made CM Punk more important than yourself, the championship, and even your wife, which was brutal. Damian Priest was cooking his promo because he spoke nothing but facts. Bro. This was a really good promo from Damian Priest. Then Damian Priest ultimately ends up giving him the title shot and basically ends up saying that he's going to prove Drew McIntyre wrong. Now, most likely this is going to be at Clash at the Castle. It only makes sense for it to be Clash at the Castle. So I'm very interested to see how that builds up. And I actually have an interesting take on that because I feel like that could go 2 ways. Because it wouldn't shock me if Damian wins, but it may not be in the way that most people would assume. But I actually think that will be a banger, of course. It most likely going to have a Clash at the Castle. That's the only pay-per-view I think it could happen. But this segment was really good, though. Damian cooked on the microphone. Now we get the quarterfinals of the Queen of the Ring tournament. EOS Sky for Shaina Baszler. Shaina Baszler ends up advancing. They didn't show the Zelina Vega and Shaina Baszler match. They did that at a house show. They did that for like a couple matches on the King and Queen of the Ring brackets, which is very weird. But yeah, Shaina Baszler ended up advancing. And she ended up beating Maxine Dupree because Zelina Vega ended up getting injured. So Maxine Dupree ended up replacing her. This match was really solid. This match was really good. Starts off with Shaina Baszler attacking Io Sky during her entrance. Shayna got the upper hand and cuts to the commercial. Shayna dominated for a bit, but Io ends up making a comeback. She throws Shayna off the top rope and then end up doing a moonsault towards the outside. Then it goes back to commercial. Then we got a very cool sequence where Io ended up doing a bridge pin. Then Shayna ends up reversing the bridge pin into her signature submission. I know what it's called, but I end up always mispronouncing it, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But she ends up doing her signature submission lock. Then it gets reversed by EOS Sky into a STF. Then it gets reversed by Shaina Baszler into a backbreaker. That was a very cool sequence. Then after the backbreaker, she ends up hitting a running knee. Then Shayna tries to go for another running knee, but Io Sky reverses it into a leg screw, which ends up playing like an injury angle with Shaina Baszler. Eventually, then Io Sky does her double like running knee into the turnbuckle. I forgot. I don't know what the move is called, but y'all should know what I'm talking about. And then she ends up hitting the moonsault for the victory. Io Sky advanced to the third round of the Queen of the Ring tournament. Next, we got Judgment Day segment. Carlito ends up, with the group trying to basically convince Damian Priest. He's basically trying to get on Damian Priest's good side, but Damian just don't trust him yet. Damian is just not really trying to let Carlito in the group. Carlito got to end up proving himself to end up getting on Damian's good side for the most part, which we would end up seeing later on this episode of Raw. Now we get an Alpha Academy segment. Chad Gable is talking down on Alpha Academy, talking down on them, trying to, basically he wants them to win some matches, to help him out with his Intercontinental Championship opportunity. He starts talking down on Maxine Dupree since she lost in the Queen of the Ring tournament. Then he starts talking to Otis. He was able to give Otis an opportunity to fight Sami Zayn. He's talking about, I need you to wear Sami Zayn down. And he starts talking to Otis. He's telling Otis that he doesn't want to see him dance. He don't want to see him rip off his shirt. He wants Otis to be serious. Then he ends up talking to Tozawa. Ends up telling Tozawa to not blow it because he ends up setting a match against Bronson Reed. Tells him, you better not blow it. I better not see you dance. You better not rip your shirt. And you better not disappoint me. Basically talking down on the whole Alpha Academy. The Alpha Academy are basically upset and very down that Chad Gable is basically belittling them. And then once Chad Gable, Otis, and Tozawa ends up walking off, Ivy now approaches Maxine Dupree. She ends up approaching Maxine Dupree, ends up trying to convince her, telling her that you don't got to listen to Gable, you don't got to take the disrespect and all that. Chad Gable ends up interferes, ends up telling Maxine to go train, to actually put in some work. Then he talks to Ivy now, talking about Ivy has a lot of potential and all, and I will give you some advice. And he ends up saying that, how about you stop wasting your time on Taylor Not So Swift? That was a good line. That was a very good line. That was a very good line. He really called Maxine Dupree Taylor Not So Swift. That was hilarious. That was a really good segment. I'm really loving what I'm seeing from Chad Gable as a heel. Now, I don't see Chad Gable winning soon. I really don't. Maybe he could win at Clash at the Castle or SummerSlam, but I highly doubt he wins this triple threat. For me personally, I just don't see Sami Zayn losing. Not yet. But I'm really love what they're doing with Chad Gable as a heel. Now we get a quick segment with Samantha Irving, and she's in the ring, and she ends up announcing Lillian Garcia. She gets in the ring, and she ends up announcing the next match. I love Lillian Garcia. She's actually my GOAT in terms of ring announcing. Samantha is right behind her, but this was a great moment. Don't know if she's going to be, I don't think she's going to be fully back. I think this is probably just a one-off thing, but this was a good one-off. I love Lillian. She's great. She's really great at her job. She gave props to Samantha Irving, and this was a really good segment. This was a solid segment for what it was, though. Now we get Gunther versus Kofi Kingston for the Raw side of the King of the Ring, the quarterfinals for them. Kofi Kingston, of course, ended up advancing against Rey Mysterio. That also wasn't shown on TV. That was also at a house show. Don't know why they decided to do some of the matches on house shows, but it is what it is. This was also a solid match. Kofi Kingston attacks Gunther during his entrance, same like Shaina Baszler. Of course, he wants payback. He wants revenge for what Gunther did to Xavier Woods. And also, they end up playing an injury angle like they did in the Gunther versus Xavier Woods. Kofi Kingston attacked Gunther's right leg. He ended up injuring Gunther's right leg, and then it cuts to commercial. Then, for the good portion of the match, Gunther started dominating, but Kofi Kingston ended up getting the advantage when Gunther tried to go for his clothesline, but Kofi Kingston ends up reversing it into a SOS. Then we get a sequence where they're on the outside, and Gunther tries to do a power bomb into the ring post, but Kofi was able to reverse it, throws Gunther into the ring post. Then he was able to hit the Trouble in Paradise on the outside. Then the ref is counting. He's about to hit a 10 count. Kofi gets in around 8. Gunther gets in at 9. Then Kofi tries to do it again, tries to do Trouble in Paradise again, but Gunther reverses it, hits a powerbomb, goes for the pin, stops the pin into a Boston Crab, and taps Kofi Kingston out. Gunther ends up advancing. This was a solid match, really good match. Kofi Kingston puts up a good fight, but of course he had to lose. It was unfortunate, but he had to lose. This was a really good match, though. Only made sense for Gunther to win. Now we get a segment between Lyra Valkyria and Liv Morgan. Lyra Valkyria was getting interviewed. Liv Morgan ends up interrupting the interview. Liv Morgan comes up to her, starts congratulating Lyra for, debuting on Raw and all that. Lyra ends up thanking her, but then Liv Morgan ends up saying that has Becky Lynch always been a bitch? Lyra ends up saying that, why don't you ask her? Because Becky Lynch popped up out of nowhere, ended up being right behind Liv Morgan. Becky Lynch ends up punching Liv Morgan and ends up saying that, knocking Liv Morgan to the ground, ends up saying that, I'm not the one who's scared of a face-to-face fight, bitch. It was a good segment. I love what they did with Becky Lynch here. Now, I will say the punch that she did was very fake. I'm just going to say it was very obviously fake. Now, I will say this. She was a little too close to Liv. So, because typically when wrestlers punch, they like to kind of swing their elbows a bit so they can't actually punch the wrestler in the face. So, I would give her, some leniency there. But the punch was very weak and it looked very fake. But this was a good segment. And this may be me. I just don't see Liv Morgan winning this title. I don't know what it is about it, but something's telling me that she's not winning at the King and Queen of the Ring pay-per-view. Something's telling me she's not winning, but I could be wrong. Now we get a segment with Karrion Kross and Kofi Kingston. Karrion Kross walks up to Kofi Kingston, ends up telling Kofi, tough loss, but it's always time to turn things around. And then he walks off. So I'm very curious to see how they played this up. If they are gonna do a Karrion Kross and New Day feud, they need to have Karrion Kross win that because New Day have been losing for a while anyway, and it only makes sense for them to continue losing because they're already Hall of Famers. They don't really need any more wins for the most part. They're kind of more of enhancement talent, which is good for them as of right now, especially without BE. So I think this was good. This could actually be a solid feud. I think this is a feud that could actually help Karrion Kross, and I'm interested to see where it goes. Now we get Bronson Reed versus Akira Tozawa. We already knew Akira Tozawa wasn't going to win, but throughout the match, Chad Gable was constantly shouting in his match, constantly he was kind of, I wouldn't say annoying because he was doing some good heel work. I was entertained by the shouting, but it was kind of off-putting at times. Anytime Tozawa was getting some offense, basically Chad Gable was basically taking credit, saying that that's all me. I taught him what to do. Then Akira Tozawa, of course, ends up ripping his shirt, not listening to Chad Gable. Chad Gable starts getting frustrated, yelling. He was like, no. Chad Gable was constantly screaming, no, don't do that. Stop doing that. Of course, Bronson Reed ends up taking advantage of that, picks up the victory and win. After the match, Chad Gable ends up belittling and berating Tozawa while he's on the ground, constantly yelling and screaming after the match, continuing Alpha Academy not being happy with Chad Gable. Now we get an interview segment with Ludwig Kaiser and Kathy Kelly. Kathy Kelly ends up mentioning Ilja Dragunov, Jey Uso, and Sheamus, how all three of those men have either beaten Gunther or gave Gunther a hard time, and Gunther hasn't beaten them clean. Ludwig goes on a rant. He goes on a huge rant about Sheamus. He kind of ignored Jey Uso and Ilja Dragunov, and he went on a huge rant on Sheamus, basically saying Sheamus isn't worthy, Sheamus isn't on Gunther's level, Sheamus doesn't deserve to be in the same ring as Gunther, and that he will put Sheamus in his place if he needs to. He was going on a huge rant on Sheamus. And I don't know if they're going to continue the Gunther and Sheamus feud, because I think I seen something on Sheamus' Instagram or something where he said that a fourth match isn't happening. So I don't know if they're going to do Ludwig versus Sheamus, but I'm very interested to see how that goes. Now we get a Adam Pearce segment. He's getting interviewed, and he ends up announcing that there's going to be a fatal four-way tag team match for the number one contender for Awesome Truth tag titles. He ends up saying the tag teams that will be in the match is New Catch Republic, Authors of Pain, the Creed Brothers, and JD and Finn Balor. Then Braun Breaker comes in, talks about how he should have been in the King of Ring tournament, how he would dominate everyone in the King of Ring tournament, and then walks off. Very interested to see what they do with Braun Breaker, because he should have been in the King of the Ring tournament, and Adam Pearce's explanation for why he was in the King of the Ring tournament didn't make sense, because his explanation was the people that was in the tournament have proven themselves over a course of time. You can't say that but have Ilja Dragunov and Lyra Valkyria in the now Lyra Valkyria is in the Queen of the Ring tournament, but if you're going to use that argument for the King of the Ring, that argument should apply for the Queen of the Ring as well. You can't have two NXT call-ups in the tournament but say Braun Breaker needs to prove himself when Braun Breaker and Ilja Dragunov have similar resumes. The only thing you have on Ilja is that he had one match before he got called up against Shinsuke. But Braun Breaker was on SmackDown before. It just didn't make sense. His logic didn't make sense. But I'm very interested to see what they do with Braun Breaker. They need to do something, because it kind of makes sense. Like, it kind of doesn't make sense for them to have nothing with Braun Breaker, to be honest with you. You could have had Braun Breaker in a tag team division with Baron Corbin, like, if you didn't have nothing planned for him. But we'll see how that goes. Next up, we got the other match in the quarterfinals for the Queen of the Ring tournament. Lyra Valkyria, Zoe Starks. This match was decent, nothing special. Lyra picks up the victory. Zoe tries to hit the 360, but it got reversed into the Nightwing. Lyra picks up the victory, and she will go to the third round to face EOS Sky. Now we get Otis versus Sami Zayn. This match was not very long. Chad Gable did the same thing he did in the Akira Tozawa versus Bronson Reed, constantly yelling and shouting, constantly, taking all the credit. Yet anytime Otis got some advantage, he's basically yelling, shouting, saying that I taught him that. Then in the match, Chad Gable and Otis starts arguing, because Otis starts doing, the ripping the shirt. He didn't want Otis to do the worm, but Otis ends up doing the worm anyway. Then they get into an argument, which ends up costing Otis the match. Sami ends up hitting a haluva kick, picks up the victory. Then Gable starts, do the same thing he did to Tozawa after Tozawa lost to Bronson Reed, starts berating him. But this time, Sami Zayn comes in for the save, hits Chad Gable with a haluva kick. Then, no, he didn't hit him with a haluva. He ends up doing his signature suplex, setting up the haluva kick, but Chad Gable ends up getting out the ring. Then afterwards, Otis is like holding Chad Gable. Chad Gable pushes Otis off him, starts blaming Otis, said, "This is your fault, and then slaps Otis, and walks off. And Otis is looking at the crowd. The crowd is chanting for Otis. They're chanting for Otis to, fight back, but Otis doesn't and walks with Chad Gable. I love what they're doing with Chad Gable. I really love what they're doing it. And eventually, once Alpha Academy ends up turning on him, that would be a crazy pop. Now we get a quick segment with JD McDonough and Braun Strowman. Basically, JD McDonough says that you're on Judgment. Basically, Judgment Day has beef with you, and we're coming for you, basically. And it looks like that's going to be their next rivalry. Not really interested, but could interest me, though. Next up, we got Dakota Kai versus Becky Lynch. Not going to talk too much about the match, because the match ended in a disqualification. Damage Control ends up interfering in the match once Becky had Dakota Kai in the armbar. They attack Becky Lynch. Lyra Valkyria comes in, makes the save. After she makes the save, they're in the ring. Liv Morgan comes from behind, attacks Becky Lynch, throws Becky Lynch into the ring post, and that's the ending of the segment there. So building up, Becky Lynch, Liv Morgan, nothing too major happened there. Then we got a quick segment, a little tease from Ilja Dragunov. Ilja is basically, talking about, the King of the Ring tournament, how he's going to win, how he needs to win. Then he starts mentioning Gunther. He mentions Gunther. He mentions how he's the one that defeated Gunther. And then he turns around and Gunther is right next to him. And they just have a stare down. And then Gunther walks off. This was a really good tease. This was a really good tease of them teasing that this match will happen. This match will eventually happen. And we just got to wait and see when that match happens. I'm very excited, and I can't wait till that match happens. Now we get the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team between Judgment Day with JD and Finn, New Catch Republic, the Creek Brothers, and Otis and May. This was a solid match, very solid match, very chaotic match, every chaotic. But I'm gonna get towards the end. Pete Dunne had JD McDonough on the announce table. Because Pete Dunne was about to pin Finn Balor, but JD McDonough ends up making a save, ends up pulling Pete Dunne outside the ring. So Pete Dunne ends up attacking JD. They're on the outside, they're on the announce table. And Pete Dunne was about to do a move on the announce table, but Carlito ends up interfering in the match, ends up hitting the backstabber on Pete Dunne onto the announce table. Then Finn Balor ends up taking advantage of that. JD ends up throwing Pete Dunne in the ring. Finn Balor hits the coup de grace for the 1-2-3, ends up picking up the victory. This was really good match, good way of having Carlito interfere, and I liked that. And I kind of knew Judgment Day was going to win because Awesome Truth needed to face someone at the King and Queen in the Ring pay-per-view, and it had to be a heel. There's no way you're going to do babyface versus babyface because Awesome Truth are just too over for them to face another babyface. Had to have them face a heel. And the only other heel tag team was Authors of Pain. And no offense, Authors of Pain are just not over enough to have that match. So having Finn Balor and JD McDonough was the obvious choice. Then after that, we get a Judgment Day segment with Carlito again. Carlito was about to walk out because it looked like Damian Pierce still doesn't accept him, but Damian ends up accepting him. Ends up saying that what you did out there was cool, and ends up accepting him, but he ends up telling him that he needs to handle his business though. And it looks like Carlito is not a member of the Judgment Day, but the alliance that they're having right now is, they're going to have an alliance for a bit. Now we get to the main event. Ilo Dragonov versus Jey Uso. This was a solid match. Wasn't as good as I expected it, but this was a solid match. This was really good, but we already knew how it was going to end. This was my prediction. Jey Uso was going to pick up the victory. Jey Uso had to pick up the victory here, in my opinion. It only made sense. I understood people wanted Ilja to win, but Jey Uso had to pick up the victory. This was still a good match, though. It went to the wire, though, but Ilja went for, I think Ilja went for an H-bomb, if I'm not mistaken. No, he went for a torpedo mask out. That's what he went for. He went for a torpedo mask out, but Jey Uso ends up spearing him. Then he ends up hitting an Uso Blast, pick up the victory. After the match, Gunther ends up making his ends up coming out, and Jey Uso and Gunther have a stare down, and that will be the last round of the King of the Ring tournament. That match should hit. That's going to be very interesting. I'm very interested to see what they do there because it's going to be very hard. I just don't see Jey Uso winning that match because on the SmackDown side, most likely, it's going to be Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga because I don't think LA Knight's winning anymore based off what they already did on SmackDown with Randy Orton wanted payback. So I think they're going to do Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga. Now, you could do Tama Tonga versus Jey Uso to do the Bloodline storyline, but I don't know. They could do that. It wouldn't shock me if they did that. So it's very interesting. But I'm very interested to see how this plays out. Because the King of Ring tournament is pretty good. The Queen of Ring side is really good. This was a solid episode of Monday Night Raw. Building up to the King and Queen of Ring pay-per-view. Very excited for that. You guys let me know what you guys thought of this episode of Raw. I thought it was pretty solid. Good show. But you guys let me know. Did you enjoy the show? Make sure you leave your thoughts and opinions down below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. But yeah, that's it.